Hi there and welcome to the Taking Territory blog with Mark, and today we're going to talk about the subject of excellence standards. If you were to go into any British Army mess or any gentleman's club in the UK and you were incorrectly attired, someone would very quickly take you aside and say, listen in, old boy, we don't dress like that around here, don't come in wearing trainers, don't come in wearing jeans or whatever, and probably they would finish off by saying, standards in the mess, old chap, standards in the mess. So this really gets us thinking about the world, the environment in which we live in, that people have recognized over the years that it is important to have standards, to meet a required standard in order to participate or be involved or to further the life of that community. And I think as we look at the world in which we live in at the moment, it reminds me of a book I think it was written about 2005, 2006. I didn't read it, but the title was very catchy. It was a little sweary, so I'm not going to use it, but it was called Why is Everything Rubbish? Why is Everything Crap? And I think the underlying aspect about the book was that why does nothing work the way that it should? And perhaps this points us to a previous and earlier civilization, the Roman Empire, which waxed and waned over the years. And at the early stages of its life, it was dynamic, it was vibrant, the craftsmanship was exquisite. But slowly, as the empire started fading out, people paid less attention to the quality of the workmanship. Taxes were raised, the people were over-regulated. It just became almost too difficult to live in that society, and that's possibly a little bit, for me it's the canary in the coal mine whenever I look at our own lives now. Yes, there's lots of stuff that is good. There's improved nutrition, there's less poverty, better access to medical care. But if you've ever tried recently in a Western democracy to deal with administration, it's virtually impossible, and it's something that certainly I reflect upon. And I think, as I said, I think this could be a bit of a canary in the coal mine, and I think it demands excellence from all of us to make sure that we have that vibrancy and dynamism that I was talking about. It's almost a revivification of society to make sure that we stay youthful and we stay useful in the future. And it makes me think, as a more everyday example, the tale of two airlines. And I'm a business traveller, often, maybe less so recently, but I do get to travel, and one of the airlines I'll travel with is Emirates, and I was even once bumped up to first class. But even on a general level, I think it can be argued that they provide an excellent service. They really do try and take out the friction of all the little difficult points and to get people through, and that's a good thing. But certainly for that, you will pay a price. But before that price that you pay, there's good customer service and there's good quality. We can all then think of budget airlines, those airlines in our respective countries that seem to hit us, that while the headline price is cheap, nearly the hassle of dealing with them and going through them almost nearly makes it not worth it. So it's something that kind of gets me thinking about how excellence is absolutely hardwired into us. And excellence is tangible, and it's also, there's elements of intangibility in it as well. And whenever we don't receive an excellent service, or whenever we're not excellent ourselves, it disappoints us. There's something that just grips us right in our heart there and makes us think that there could have been more work put into it. There could have been better performance. So I believe that we were very much built for perfection. It's something that is, as I've said, is hardwired into us. And we know that we fall short on a daily basis. We don't always deliver perfection. Now, there's an old-fashioned compelling word for this. It's still very relevant to this day, but it's not used as much. The word is sin, originally from the Greek hamartia, which talks about falling short. And you can imagine an archer taking aim at a target. He fires his arrow at the last moment, he fluffs it, and he releases the arrow, and he misses the target. Now, of course, he will walk away feeling quite disappointed about that. So sin as well, notwithstanding, it is the true interpretation of sin is essentially a transgression against God's holiness. But allied to that as well, of course, you've got a moral, a physical, or a spiritual failure. And I think every one of us can look at our lives and see that's just how we are every single day. And despite our best efforts we just keep cocking things up, and we nearly don't know why. We're fallible. As much as we're hardwired for perfection, we're hardwired to ruin things. And in the Bible, in Romans chapter 7, Paul the Apostle, he even said something similar as well. He said, I do not understand what I do, for what I want to do, I do not do, but what I hate to do. So even he's been struggling with this for quite a while. And then this brings us around to a slightly separate point as well. Still allied to this about not doing what you want to do, but doing what you don't want to do. Within each one of us, there is a destructive corner of evil in our hearts. And I think that actually Dostoevsky brings this up really well in his essay or his short book called Notes from the Underground. And an underground man says something quite important, and he's talking about humans and people here. He says, right, shower him with all earthly blessings, drown him in happiness completely over his head, so that only bubbles pop up on the surface of happiness, as on water. Give him such economic satisfaction that he no longer has anything left to do at all except sleep, eat gingerbread, and worry about the non-cessation of world history. And it is here, just here, that this man, out of sheer ingratitude, out of sheer lampoonery, will do something nasty. He will even risk his gingerbread and wish on purpose for the most pernicious nonsense, the most non-economical meaningless, solely in order to mix into all this positive good sense his own pernicious fantastical element. So what Dostoevsky is saying here is that even if man has it absolutely perfect, everything's running like clockwork in his environment, there's that small corner in his heart that says, I'm just going to stick a spanner into the engine here. I'm just going to stick the screwdriver into the spokes just to see what happens. There's something that's in us that is inherently destructive if we don't constrain it. And this makes me think of the Garden of Eden. And the Garden of Eden, I think, encapsulates the very story and the essence of the human condition. At the early stages, we were talking about perfection, we were talking about abundance, we were talking about communion with God, we were talking about a peace and a happiness. There was an order to life. And then, through the sin of Adam and Eve, the human race found themselves thrust into a cold, irrational, dark world. I think it has to be said that I think we recognise this within our own hearts. The very DNA in the fibre of our body recognises this. It tells us an internal story that we sense of tragedy and divine justice, and I think our body groans under the weight of this, knowing that we once had it all, but we blew it. We just had to light the church paper to see what would happen. And, part of our life, and every one of us, we feel an obligation to redeem, to restore, to make up for what happened. Now, sadly, we know that works will ultimately never save us. They are certainly good in the moment, and it's good to do, but from an eternal perspective, only faith in Jesus Christ saves. But it's certainly something that if we persist in the thinking that work is salvific, if we can be perfect, that somehow we will attain paradise on this earth. And while it's good from an earthly perspective, from a spiritual perspective, it's not useful. But I think that ties in the story of why we're seeking excellence. Now, the good news, I think, in all of this is now that we've recognized the fact that we can't be perfect, we're imperfect beings in an irrational world. So how then must we live? So I think that every single one of us, we will excel in certain areas. And so it's important to us, and there's other areas, of course, that we don't excel in, and we're all built slightly differently. So those areas that we do excel in, we need to focus on them, and we need to make sure that those areas work well. And in the areas that we're maybe not so good on, we just need to keep them maintained, and we just need to not be like the man that Underground Man describes, the person who just presses the button out of sheer boredom just to see what happens, because you could bring the whole edifice crumbling down, and that would be bad. So we know typically through various studies that there are around 16 basic personality types, and each one of those personality types has 2 to 3 core skills, which areas where they're really excellent on. for me, if I can tell you that I certainly have my weaknesses, and those weaknesses would be certainly in the area of routine administration. I struggle with boring routine process tasks, but I recognize that they're very important. So over the years, I have set up mechanisms and ways of making sure that the detail is picked up, it's recorded, and it's dealt with at certain times. Those are the areas whenever I'm doing this work, I am not in the zone, but I know that it's important work that needs to be done. But then that brings me on to the next point. There are 2 or 3 areas that I have that I know that I do okay in. For example, people have told me I'm useful with ideas and coming up with ideas. I'm a useful communicator. Now, I know by no stretch of the imagination am I in any way world class, and actually this is one of the reasons why I'm writing these blogs and I'm doing these video posts at the moment, because I believe that this is something that I can work on, and maybe hopefully if you've looked at some of the past ones and you're looking at this one now, you can see a slow, gradual improvement. And this is something that I feel is very important, and I feel that our gifts, those areas that we have, we need to focus on them, and often I think we get distracted with the areas we're not good at. But do you know what? Because there's 16 different basic personality types, that's for other people to pick up those areas. So long as you're doing your duty in the area that you're set and you're bringing your A game and you're playing to the maximum of your potential, well, I think that's all that can be asked of you. We need to bring excellence into our lives and maintain standards every single day. And it was interesting, as a final parting shot, I have a friend who keeps a very immaculately clean motorcycle, and I did ask him one time, I said, how do you keep your motorbike so clean? And he looked at me dryly and says, I wash it a lot. And initially I kind of laughed, but you know what? Okay, of course that's obvious, but there is absolute genius in this. And his approach, as it were, you can apply that approach to life. If he misses a spot today, whenever he goes to wash it tomorrow, he will pick up on that spot. And if he misses a bit the next day, it always gets picked up. So at any one time, the bike is 95% clean, and every time he's getting a spot that he misses. So he is maintaining the standards, he is keeping the excellent level high, but by constantly going back over the process. And I think that lots of us think that sometimes if we need to do something, it's a gargantuan effort, it's a one-time focus. But actually, it's daily, consistent, excellent habits, and focusing on what we're supremely good at and working in those areas that really are going to bring about the best results. So I think that all really excellence is, it is continual improvement, it is maintenance of standards, and actually it is the byproduct of a focused, well-lived life. And we should all be trying to attain this. And if you're in any doubt, remember the old chap approaching you in the mess saying, standards, old boy, standards. Keep the standards high, keep working, keep striving to be better every day, and focus especially in those areas where you're gifted. Catch you in the next video.